to a wounded world in need of healing and compassion.
In the midst of our vulnerability and emptiness.
In a time of limited and unevenly shared global resources,
we ask for the grace to stand with the poor, the suffering, the oppressed.
To promote social justice.
To promote economic justice.
To promote environmental justice.
To be a community of unity and reconciliation.
You're not welcome here. Think about that for a second. I'm a teacher. I was born in Pakistan. My family came to Canada in 1970. Toronto in 1970 was a British city, like it was 85% British. Forget about being white. It was like to be the Italian was the exotic other. When you were the only Pakistani kid, you're one of a handful of brown kids. And you know, you didn't see people that looked like you in the media. The only people that I saw with dark skin were African-American folks, like athletes, that kind of thing. The first time I actually had like Muslim friends was in university, because in high school, we were the only Muslim family. It wasn't like we were doing the religious observances, because it typically would be like, you know, you'd go to the mosque for the 2 Eids at the end of the Ramadan month of fasting, you know, that kind of stuff. But it wasn't like this wasn't like a regular sort of thing. I came to the study of Islam really in an accidental way. I was a psych major with an English minor. And, you know, as you're studying English literature, you begin to realize, oh yeah, I need to understand the Bible. You know, I didn't know the Bible. And so, okay, maybe I should take a course in the Bible, because that helps you understand, you know, Shakespeare, Blake. Blake makes no sense if you don't know the biblical traditions. I didn't know the stories, and that's where the moment came. Wait, I'm a Muslim. Maybe I should learn something about my own religion. You know, maybe I should study the Quran as well. And that's where you begin to have that sense of, okay, who am I? And on the one hand, you know, I'm a male, I'm straight, but I am brown and I'm Muslim. In this way, I may be part of the dominant culture. In this way, I may be part of the minoritized culture. So I know what it's like to be discriminated against because of the color of my skin, because of my religious orientation, but I'm also a man who's straight. And there's a certain, you know, power that comes with that, a privilege that comes with that. You know, you grew up with gay friends. Do I know what it's like to be a gay man? Nope. But it's exactly that sense of, you understand, you know who's underrepresented. Do I know what it's like to be a woman? Of course not. But do I take their experiences seriously? I think the danger becomes when we only think about ourselves. When I only think, okay, is it just this part of me? Or all I care about is I want Muslims to advance, or, you know, I want brown people to advance. Of course, I want Muslims to advance. Of course, I want brown people to advance. But what about women? What about gay people? What about people with disabilities? What about people? What about, you know, how do you create that kind of world? And I think it goes back to that question. I got welcomed in this place. How do you welcome people in this place? Like, what is it that someone saw in me that says, you know what, that working class kid, that immigrant kid whose parents work in factories, maybe he's got something going for him. And I think it comes back to that question of what I try to do as a teacher. How do I bring that welcoming energy? How do you welcome people? I started college in 1983. That's a weird moment to think, like, this fall will be like 40 years since I was a freshman in college. But as someone who grew up working class poor, you were concerned about injustice, food, that kind of thing. And it was at that beginning, it was at the beginning of the food bank movements. You saw signs posted around the university for this new thing, the Daily Bread Food Bank. And it was running out of this church. It was a Protestant church. And I was like, oh, that interests me. Let me go and help. Let me go volunteer. Not for any sort of religious, spiritual thing. I didn't know a thing about Christian traditions around feeding the hungry, feeding the poor. And then that makes you discover your own traditions. Oh, wait. What is it? What is my tradition? Tell me what I should be doing. So in a funny way, I think the comparative stuff helps you to learn your own. And, both my parents, they worked in factories. Both my parents hadn't been to university. So I'm what we now call first to go, like that, the first generation. And so the smartest thing I could think of was, being a doctor. As a child of immigrant parents, success means you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer, that kind of thing. So that's what I wanted to do. I took pre-med courses. I took English courses. I was interested in other things, anthropology, psychology. Psychology was the most interesting to me just because, again, it said, who am I? And very quickly on, it was like, oh, you can get paid to like read and write and think. Like there's this category called an intellectual, and that's like a job. How do I get that job? Or what's a PhD? I think that moment of, oh, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. I want to be an intellectual. I didn't know that was a possibility. And that's where you start to talk about the doubt. Can I do this? What helped me was that I had these extraordinary mentors, these people who were amazing, amazing scholars, took my work seriously, or at least thought I had something interesting to say. And they were all extraordinarily generous and helpful. I used to be an athlete. I don't look like that now because, you're old and fat and slow. But I played basketball in college. And when you're an athlete, there's a certain confidence, like, what you can do with the basketball, but what you can't do. I got dunked on regularly, but it's that you have a certain amount of confidence. You're teaching all the time, whether you're in the classroom or outside in the community. And it's funny because I get talks all the time post 9/11, and often you get very hostile and vitriolic kinds of responses. And I'm thinking, like, where is this coming from? Because it's not about me. They've never met me. But then in the US, all right, if I'm the only Muslim you've ever met, and the only image of Muslims you have is the terrorist who destroyed the World Trade Center, then of course you're going to be angry. Of course you're going to be upset. And it's the images. One of my students in a previous class of images of Muslims put up a picture of Osama bin Laden. Everyone knows who that guy is, Then he puts up a picture of Ahmed Zwal, a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry. Yeah, no one knew who that was. Then he puts up a picture of Shireen Nishat, this amazing Iranian woman artist. No one knew who that was. Okay, so if the Muslim recognized is the terrorist and not the artist or the Nobel Prize winner, what does that tell you? I'm a teacher. I think the students understand that I'm actually genuinely interested in them, and I'm interested in their development, and there's a trust there. I think that's part of it. That part I love, because students come in thinking that theology is boring. I always begin my classes with music. That helps them to get a sense of, wait, it's not just about learning facts. I start with the sort of music that I listen to, which is typical American, North American, rap, hip hop, country, rock, Western kind of stuff. I ask them to talk about a piece of music and why it's important to them, but then you surprise them by playing something, different, like a different kind of song. I remember the first time you'll appreciate this, or at least I hope you'll appreciate this. Britney Spears' Work Bitch. I love that song because that song by Britney partly just is a great dance video, but it's like, you want a hot body? You want a Bugatti? You want a Maserati? You better work, bitch. You got to work. They come in thinking, I'm going to stand there with prayer, open up a Bible, and make them piously read the book, To know, it's okay to have questions. Maybe that's the thing that always surprises them, that you can be a faithful person and also have questions and doubts. The reason I do what I do is not because I have the answers. It's because I have the questions. I'm trying to find the answers. If you asked me in high school, do you want to be a teacher? I would have said no, because I saw what my friends did in high school to teachers, and it was not pleasant. That existence was not a good existence. My wife teaches fourth grade, and I say she's the real teacher in the family. I couldn't do what that woman does. Working with 32 9-year-olds for 7 hours a day, it's extraordinary. Oh, yeah. That's a great story. So I'm here teaching at Cal State Northridge. This is 2001. 9/11 happens. And as an American Muslim, you're really pulled into stuff. I got an invitation to give a talk at North Hollywood Interfaith Food Pantry, literally the day before Thanksgiving. And my first thought was, oh man, I'm tired. It's been a long couple months. But then I thought, well, no, this is my thing. It's hunger and it's poverty. I can't turn down an invitation to give a talk at this food pantry thing. And I go there, and there's this beautiful woman sort of singing in the choir. One of the songs they sing is the Julie Gold song, From a Distance. From a distance, God is watching us. It's a beautiful song. She's singing along, and she's sort of looking at me, and I'm singing along with the words. And I could tell what was going on in her head. Why does this Muslim guy know the words to this, Christian country sort of song? She comes up afterwards and talked to me. And this happened to me during Ramadan too. And I'm literally fasting. She and a couple of her friends said, oh, we know it's Ramadan. Would you like to go and have a meal? Absolutely. So that's how we met. It's hard. It's hard to think that people reduce you to an identity. In the last couple of years, with the sort of right-wing government in India, with the sectarian kind of, the Hindus in India and the Muslims in Pakistan, it's been really problematic. I now cannot travel to India. We had this meeting last year in Barcelona with Jesuits from all over the world on Jesuit higher education. It's really interesting. About a quarter of the world's Jesuits are from India. And so they said, oh, why don't we hold our next meeting in India next year? And I thought, I'm sorry, go ahead and do that, but I can't come because with the current Indian government, because I was born in Pakistan, I will not be issued a visa to India now. And I think about this for a second. I'm the chair of the theology department in this Jesuit university in Los Angeles. I'm now the president of the American Academy of Religion. The Indian government will not give me a visa to come to India because of where I was born. Think about that for a second. I'm not a Pakistani citizen. I don't have a Pakistani passport. I have a Canadian passport. I'm an American passport, but because of, it says I was born in Pakistan. It hurts. It hurts to have that, you're not welcome here. Think about that. You're not welcome here. And I think in a funny way, that's the kind of stuff that we're seeing in this country. One of the great things about America is that to be an American didn't mean you came from this family or this tribe or spoke this language. It's that you had allegiance to this document, the Constitution. What makes America, LMU, this Catholic place so amazing is that you welcome everyone. I'm a teacher. I was 4 when we came to Canada. I didn't hit my stride till probably like 2nd, 3rd grade. And it was teachers. It was teachers who saw this quiet kid who wasn't saying much, realized, oh, this kid's not stupid. He just doesn't know the language. He's shy. He doesn't have any friends because it's a new country. Let's work with him. For me, it's teaching. And that's really the sort of mission. It's not what I do. It's really who I am. I got welcomed in this place. How do you welcome people? How do you bring that welcoming energy? And a better question, the full inclusion of people, whether we're talking about, Black people, white people, female people, trans people, gay people, disabled. How do we make the world safe for persons to be human?
In 2020, the Black Faculty and Staff Association decided to revitalize itself, to reinvigorate the association, and then George Floyd was murdered. Just like that. Everything changed. The response to what we needed as Black faculty and staff, it changed the university. It changed the focus of my work. It was clear that I could not merely just plan social events.
When the Black Faculty and Staff Association met in January of 2020, we decided we were going to make the association more of a social outlet. We decided we would plan fun, upbeat activities that we would socialize more, just as Black faculty and staff. And at that meeting in January, we planned to convene again in March 2020, but obviously the pandemic struck. And then Memorial Day 2020 became a day the world will always remember. George Floyd's murder created a major shift. As Black faculty and staff, we could no longer think about our association simply being a social outlet. There was a call to make our campus an anti-racist university. This is where I have to talk about Lisa. She was such an amazing Black faculty and staff team member. I mean, remember the operative words here, the operative words are faculty and staff, right? So we did anything we did for the Black Faculty and Staff Association had to be done outside of the hours of our university positions. We are kindred spirits on the Black Faculty and Staff Association, and then we put the needs of the Black community first, right? And we share the workload. So when we are successful, each person can claim responsibility for that success. But what distinguishes Lisa, she is such a solutions person. I mean, it's always great to have a person like her on your team. I mean, in addition to being a really active member of the BFSA, it has been wonderful, honestly, to see how deeply she's got involved in the whole university. I mean, president of the Staff Senate, chair of DEI for University Advancement. Lisa has this credo that she likes to live by. If you're going to complain about something, try and be a solution to it. Better yet, you only have the right to complain if you're trying to work on being a solution. So Lisa is the perfect kind of member for our association. Again, she is a solutions person. Now, people are not born thinking like that, right? I mean, you have to be taught to think like that, to be solution oriented. I don't know. I mean, observing Lisa work all over the campus now, she is a force of nature. She is working on being a solution. Maybe she was born thinking that way.
Lisa has always been a really independent person. You know how a lot of babies like to be held and cradled when they're tired and that helps them? Lisa was not like that. She was the type of baby that wanted you to put her down. She was more fussy if you tried to cradle her. So I would just put her down and she would go right to sleep. She always has been really independent in that way. As a child, when she made up her mind to do something, look out. She didn't care if she was going to get in trouble. She just went with it. It would drive me crazy. At the time, I had no idea that quality would help her become the powerful, principled woman she is now. Such a strong, ethical center. There's a part of her that takes a strong stand. She makes a decision, and no matter what, she stands by it. I think that's just part of her DNA.
I had an experience in a job where a person I really admired and respected was not being treated the way she should have been. We were at one of the biggest privately funded charities in the world. And this person who was being mistreated was on my team. And the president of our chapter of this company had issues with her. Well, the president, personality-wise, just did not like this person on my team, who was a Black woman. And I was kind of trying to help them repair their relationship and not do what he wanted me to do. And then finally, he ordered me to fire her. It was such an injustice. She had done nothing to deem getting fired. And then a couple of weeks after I fired her, I quit. That's right. I quit because I was just, I have to go to bed at night and feel good about me, about who I am as a person. I think a relationship like that, or an experience like that, the relationship I had with her and with that job, an experience like that, it helps to shape who I am. Again, I need to feel good about me. And if there are things that don't make me feel good about me, even if sometimes it's to my own detriment, it kind of goes back to childhood. Like sometimes I would do something and I knew it was wrong, or I knew there was going to be consequences. whether it was a spanking or getting on restriction or whatever it was. Once I made my mind up, I was just going to go ahead and do it. And so I think that that kind of somewhat rebelliousness as a child, as an adult, it became my own sense of integrity, right? I feel that if something calls my integrity into question, then I have to stand firm on what I believe is right or just. I have to be a person who people say has a strong moral center. I have to stand firm for justice.
When we were in our 20s, Lisa and I witnessed a crime. It wasn't a big crime. We were at this club with a group of friends. Everyone would always go to the club and to the 7-Eleven afterwards. So this guy who Lisa was going out with was already across the street at the 7-Eleven, and we were going to meet him there. Well, as we were leaving the club, this other guy that we didn't know kept trying to talk to Lisa, and she just kind of rebuffed him and went across the street
To meet up with my date at the 7-Eleven.
And Lisa's date got out of his car to talk to Lisa and me, and he left his car on, running. Then the guy who tried to talk to Lisa came out of the club.
And he ran across the street, jumped into the running car, and stole it.
And so we witnessed it, right?
Yeah.
And so we called the police.
The police came and they ended up recovering the car, and they wanted us to press charges.
They wanted us to testify. It ended up being a gang member who stole the vehicle.
And that started this kind of harassment that we got. And it got
Somewhat ugly.
right. It got ugly. But it ended up doing, well, initially I was scared.
We were both scared.
Right. But what it really did was it pissed me off because he was trying to intimidate us not to testify.
Trying to intimidate us not to testify.
Right. And it actually did the opposite. I was like, you are not going to make me afraid to live where I live, to be who I am. You're the one who did something wrong.
That's right.
And we ended up testifying.
We ended up testifying.
And he went to jail.
He went to jail.
But it was still pretty,
Dramatic.
yes, it was traumatic. But it was really also very affirming. No one's going to steal from you in a sense of who you are, where you can live.
Where you can go.
Yeah, all that stuff.
But you remember, we did watch our backs for a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Standing up against threats and testifying in a court case did help shape who I am now. But I do feel like when I was younger, I was really much more selfish, but not like some teenagers who just see their own worldview and everything is about them. For me, there were a couple of things that happened to me as a teenager and a young adult that affected the way I saw the world. I lost my dad when I was a teenager. He had just come back into my life, and his death had a really profound impact on me. I went insular and I kind of shut people out. I was that way for a long, long while. Then one of my best friends died, Cheryl. I called her Cheryl Ann. She would get so mad at me because her middle name was not Cheryl, Ann. I was not Ann. Cheryl. She had sickle cell anemia, and she had this episode and she died unexpectedly. She had wanted so much for herself. She wanted to be in love. She wanted to get married. Before she died, she had a baby. She wanted to raise her baby. When Cheryl died, my family was really worried that I was going to go even more inward. But Cheryl's passing had the opposite effect on me. It was like through her, I realized you can't, you have to be open, you know? You can only experience things, beauty, love, even hurt, if you're open to it. You have to be open. And so I think Cheryl changed things. Cheryl changed me. Her death changed me. Her life and then her death had a really profound impact on me. Cheryl Jansen. She kind of saved me, because before she died, I was very much closed off to letting people in. After Cheryl's death, she was kind of like a sacrifice in a sense. Obviously for her, in that she died, but it was in a sense a gain, which is, it opened my heart for good. So it was a painful gain, but a good one too. Cheryl's death helped me to become who I was created to be. Cheryl's family is still a part of my family. Her son is big now, Sammy Sam. He lives in Atlanta. We're on Facebook. I haven't seen him for a while because he was raised by his father. And Cheryl's sister Pam is like a sister to me. And get this, Cheryl's is actually my sister's best friend. And Cheryl's mom, I just went to Miss Joanne's 70th birthday party. Our lives are so entwined because Cheryl's stepbrother is the father of my nephew. So we're very much intertwined. Yeah. I think Cheryl's mom thought I was trouble when I was a teenager, and now she adores me. Yeah. If things had happened in a different way at that point in my life when I was so insular, I might have stayed that way because of, especially because of the way I make a decision and just stick to it. Cheryl did not live a long life at all, but the way things happened, her death at that point in my life broke my heart open for good. I decided that this is a better way to be. Yeah. To lose someone, but to gain so much from it, it's beyond bittersweet, right? And now relationships are so important to me. I mean, what I do now is all about building relationships and being authentically open-hearted to each other. I would like my legacy to be what Cheryl's life did for me, what Cheryl's death did for me, through building relationships and being truly open-hearted. I would like to help people to become who they were created to be. Yeah.
I got hired at LMU in January of 2004 for $9 an hour, 10 hours a week, working at LMU Extension and trying to get enrollments for the addiction counseling program. In California, there was going to be a new law that you had to have a minimum amount of training in order to be an addiction counselor. Now, before that law, there were no requirements. And so LMU Extension started this pilot program. I was in its first graduating class, and I was the charismatic student who they said, well, we'll give you $9 an hour, like the good late stage capitalists that they were, to help build the program. I eventually got hired full time because I built the program. It turned into one of California's premier extension-based professional development career enhancement programs for what's called co-occurring disorders. So the intersection between community mental health and substance use disorders, what people would call addiction. But now I'm the university's frontline person when someone has to make a decision. Is this individual of danger to themselves or others? And oftentimes we can't tell, but someone has to make a decision. So somebody gets walked over to psychological services, which is our student counseling center. Public safety, which is our police force on campus, takes a student over for crisis assessment. So I get the jingle. Then I'm making the level of care and emergency assessment, and I go on record as saying it. Now, most of the time it's based on criteria that are very vague and blurry. So we have to protect the university and protect our community. And a lot of times it's just a young kid being inconvenienced. It isn't full-blown addiction. Are they using too many drugs and drinking too much? Sure. I mean, you should have seen the 70s. They were glorious. Let's not be too out of touch with our students and how they're responding to the conditions of our lives. So that's one way. Now, another way that tends to be more dramatic is direct student reports, Good Samaritan reports. Now, I'm well known on campus. He's the atheist who sticks it to the man, you know, who has famous friends, who says F you to power. So the kids like me. Now, it's all part of the shtick. None of it's actually true. It's just the story that we use to be protective. The students will tell me that they're afraid of somebody overdosing. When a student reports they're afraid, it's serious because I'm the man. They're narking on their friends. They're going to lose their scholarship because there's a bong on their table. I don't care about any of that. So I do what's called a subtle screening and severity index. And the kids never know what I'm doing while I'm doing it. You know, I'm asking about Barry Manilow or telling you, if I find out that you're drinking box wine, I'm going to walk out of here. And it's all irreverence. It's all misdirection. It's all trying to build an alliance so I can get at the truth, because garbage in, garbage out. Now, then we have to decide what is the appropriate level of care. Now, for most students, you want to use the least intrusive intervention possible. So I refer them to an outpatient center, what you would know as a detox, what we now call withdrawal management. So, you know, it's all about stabilization and contours of care and trying to get them back in the saddle. We would like you to finish your college career, because if you can't get your shit together here, it's going to be hell down the bluff, because this is the marshmallow. You've got lots of support. You've got lots of eyes on you. There's lots of good scaffolding to orient you towards your best self. That's all going away. So let's get it right here. So, you know, sometimes it's a full-blown residential treatment followed by a year timeout, but it always depends. You know, there's not a clear roadmap, which makes the work very, very risky. You know, I take a lot of risks. Angry parents, angry families, suffering kids, university policies, confidentiality, educational rights and privacy. It's just one giant acrobatic dance in danger, what I do. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and Pittsburgh, PA. In 1969, Westinghouse lost the contract to launch nuclear missiles from submarines. They decided to go with this other Trident system that they were building, and my father was moved to Pittsburgh to work on nuclear power plants. Now, specifically decommissioning nuclear power plants. He was an engineer and specialized in weapon systems. He was one of the scientists who figured out how to put 10 bombs in one missile. He was very proud of that. We can knock out 10 cities with just one missile, the economy of it. I didn't know they weren't my real family at the time. I hadn't been told that yet. They were a foster family and things didn't go well. I ran away from home and was ultimately emancipated, and that's hard to do, to successfully run away. You know, I want to be cautious here because the rearview mirror isn't as interesting as the windshield, but you know, we all come from somewhere, and I had one of these backstories that, yeah, I mean, the people I hang out with would switch with me in a moment. They go, wow, what a life you've had. And I'm really kind of embarrassed by it. I traveled in rock bands for 25 years and was upper class homeless for a decade, made a bunch of money and promptly squandered it. I had turned 1 million into 5,000 in 2 separate decades. And, you know, that takes skill. First in advertising and the second time was in real estate. And I hated both of them. It was just a means to an end. I now know that all I wanted to do was be so valuable that I couldn't be betrayed. That was my goal in life? How could I possibly be abandoned with what I need to do? And then, of course, that would require me to betray myself. I now recognize that as I slipped into what people would call alcoholism, that the real danger of alcohol to me was that it loosened my tongue. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't wreck cars. I just destroyed my career with my tongue. That was the formation for coming back to school and eventually becoming a 2 licensed psychotherapist and the university specialist in substance use disorders and attendant mental health predicaments. Yeah, I try to move away from diagnostic labeling because diagnoses there's an epidemic of them. I'm very skeptical of many of them. Addiction is a real clunky word. The same with addicts, junkies, tweakers, dirty tests, all the neurolinguistics of stigma. I was a songwriter. I figured out very young as a kid that there was a lot of cultural capital in popular music. And so I thought, well, that looks good. And plus the girls, there was that. Let's be honest. That's why boys join bands, to get girls, and I had some success. I heard my first song on the radio when I was, 25, a song I wrote in North Carolina. It wasn't a huge national breakout, but it was a song on the radio. I figured out how to write and I was good at it for a couple of decades. And I was good enough to allow the myth to continue. I mean, I was 38 and my life was shit, but Madonna was demoing my song. We have a recovery band. We have a full-blown band set up in the studio. Keyboards, electronic drums, microphones, and we use music as a form of connection. The music is the communicator. It's the connective tissue. I have a recording studio in my modest home. The guys come over and we put on earphones and we play with the joy of playing. Now you see, addiction, the opposite of addiction is connection. It's not sobriety. In fact, very few of our students are interested in sobriety. They would like the pain to go away and they'll take a time out. But abstinence really isn't the thing that works anymore. Not for young people, not for emerging adults 17 to 26. I believe young people, particularly young people at the LMU level, I think they've made a sophisticated assessment of the world around them. It's a shit show. The social contract is falling apart. Our planet is dying. I don't know who the hell I am. It makes perfect sense to check out. I think it's a rational decision. And they have made it in the context of end stage capitalism, which is return on investment. What's the least I have to do for the most return? It has affected the relationships. It has affected everything they do. And suddenly they're disconnected because art and love aren't transactional, but we have made it such. I think the kids, they are screaming for connection. That the band is built for students to come in who are broken, who are treatment resistant. We have a student in the band right now. It has been life-changing for this individual. It is the thing that has worked. I mean, brown-eyed girl can do that. Our people need connection. They want to know what meaning, identity, and purpose is. Now, the Jesuits do that very well. The Ignatian tradition do a superb job of contouring and scaffolding corridors for reclaiming meaning, identity, and purpose. If we don't have those, drugs make excellent sense. When the kids see that I am not judging them, when I make it defensible for the choices they have made, that makes sense. Your needs aren't being met. You've done a lot of good things with your needs being unmet. Are you interested in doing a little better? Can I help you fail better? When they start hearing that, they start telling me what is really going on. I use humor, I use misdirection, and compassion must be present. Being an atheist and working at a Jesuit university is not a problem at all, because faith is a lived action and lived actions can be measured. I have faith that people can get better, that they can return to their best selves. And it turns out that journey is remarkably Ignatian. It turns out that there's a lot of similar principles and values, things that can be measured, things that can be unfractured. I mean, Father Lawton said I was the most Ignatian atheist he'd ever met. You know, I have a great deal in common with the Jesuits. I just struggle with the Bronze Age characterization of how we find ourselves here. It turned out I was good at counseling. I had no idea. I just knew that I hated real estate. I hated advertising. I was sick of the music business, and I was only an alcoholic. Everybody else was tweaking, so I was better than them. I just got sick of it all. I didn't go to treatment. I ended up breaking into a friend's building in Venice Beach where I detoxed in an elevator engine room for 6 days. Just laid there. I mean, I was sick. I was awakened by the owner of the building kicking me. He was furious at me for being sick and laying in my own sloth for 6 days. He wanted me to die. I found an AA meeting. I did AA because it was the only thing for someone who was poor and broken. It was free. It was connection. I didn't see it at the time, but it was the beginning of my reconnection. 2 years later, I would give that building owner his 1 month chip of recovery for his own addiction. He's now 15 years sober. He credits me with saving his life, and he was kicking me into consciousness in an elevator engine room. People always ask me why I do this work. I know why. I want revenge. I want revenge on systems of inequality. I'm not freely giving the gift that was given to me out of some ethical thing. It's not ethical. I'm lazy. You know, the reason I don't lie, bullshit, or cheat is because it's the easiest thing to do. It's based on my fundamental laziness, not in some high morality. And I do not need God to decide whether I'm a good person or not. So I want revenge on systems of inequality. The people that saved my life when I was sleeping under bridges, it was always the little people who helped me, and I became very fond of them. Eventually, I realized that there are no little people. That thing is a myth. So that brought me to who's telling the stories? Who the hell is telling these stories? Why am I buying into someone else's story of my reality? And that's where it began. I did not have treatment. I stopped drinking. I never relapsed. I never used alcohol and drugs again, ever. I have been sober for 23 years. I'm fully recovered. I am in no danger of becoming an alcoholic again. I could easily drink again, but I am angry at that thief.
Yeah, so I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. I always describe it as like a really full of life environment, but my community has always been socioeconomically just underserved. It's been affected by redlining, and like every time I go home, transition between seeing Westchester, a really affluent community, and then going home and seeing where like it's normal to see drug deals in the corner. It's normal to see public service institutions to be underfunded, and a lot of high schools around me, my area are, I don't know, their books are destroyed, like desks are destroyed, and they're over policed. Not in my Jesuit high school, but I have friends who went to Locke High School or Jordan High School. Those schools had on-campus police officers. It was just, I don't know, like, how can you learn in that environment? It's just not right. But we still managed to find community by being with each other, and the culture there is just incredible. My family had COVID in March 2020, right before I graduated high school. The symptoms were bad, and like every time you turn on the news, all you hear is about death. And I was really scared. The Jesuits at my high school actually would bring us meals and stuff. Like seeing that kind of solidarity, that kind of love between us. I feel like that's the way that we experience God. And now I'm here. I don't know, coming to LMU as a PWI was definitely a lot of feeling out of place, feeling like I didn't belong. This kind of sense of imposter syndrome, like maybe I wasn't supposed to be here. And it was really tough during COVID because even though we were all online, I could still see like the little boxes in Zoom that I was the only person of color in some of my classes, the only Latino in some of my classes. I had a lot going on at home. My dad had got injured at work. My mom had been in a car crash and been diagnosed with a fractured back. Some of my scholarship kind of weren't going through. So I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to come back to LMU. And I started getting into depression, not going to classes, not turning in homework. I was getting survivor's guilt because a lot of my friends weren't able to afford college. A lot of my family members aren't able to come to college like this. And I see people who are my age at work at LMU in like dining services or in facility management. And it's really weird when you see people who look like you and grew up in a similar experience as you did, and you have, in a sense, like, quote unquote, made it. I feel bad that I made it, but I wasn't able to bring mi gente, like my people, with me. And I also feel like I just couldn't, really relate to what a lot of people were talking about. Because I didn't grow up, I don't know, like going to Europe as a family trip. I didn't grow up going to visit colleges on the East Coast for my senior year of high school. I definitely never ordered a really long Starbucks order. Yeah, I just didn't grow up with that. Toward the end of the semester, I was able to like get my shit together and just get all my work done. And it was hard because I'd gotten COVID during finals week. But instead of letting that beat me up, I just kind of pulled myself up by the bootstraps. And I hate that statement, but I did. Thankfully, I had professors who were really understanding. I came to LMU wanting to be an immigration attorney, and I'm still passionate about immigration justice. I still want to do civil rights law, maybe even run for public office one day, research housing justice, things like that. I just don't know if I still want to be an immigration attorney. But I mean, I love the work that I'm doing, and I love the classes that I'm taking. There's a reason why I chose to be double majoring in theology and Spanish. I grew up in a really credo Catholic environment and more of a conservative Latinx, like mostly church, mostly the leaders. And I grew up hating it. Yeah, I grew up with people telling me stories of why like people who are LGBT are abominations, or why certain races are inferior to others. And growing up it never sat right with me. Because I always thought God calls us to love each other, She never said, unless they love someone else, or they are a particular race, or they hold a particular ideology or something. I was introduced to liberation theology in my junior year of high school, that God will liberate oppressed communities, and that God's love is not exclusive to a single group or putting a single particular social group above another, but instead, like James Martin, Father Greg Boyle, and a lot of things that Pope Francis has been saying, this kind of radical love that everyone should have available to them. And that's kind of just driven my work on my own spirituality, the idea of loving people, advocating that all people have things that protect their human dignity. Last year, I got invited to participate in like a Building Bridges initiative where I spoke with Pope Francis on Zoom. That was just a really incredible experience. I was chosen as one of 2 representatives from the Pacific West Coast region who would speak directly to Pope Francis in a televised format. I think there was 8 people total from all across like Latin America and the US, and we brought up our concerns about immigration justice. What were the causes of that? We researched, and then we posted that and decided not to work with universities, do more research. And we got to ask a few questions to Pope Francis, including asking for another meeting with him. Yeah, it was really nice because everyone else was watching it like through YouTube, and there'd be translation because it was speaking Spanish and the program was in English. And I was able to understand both English and Spanish. So I just turned off the translator Yeah, Pope Francis, definitely cool. He was saying jokes, like really funny stories throughout the whole thing. And at the end of the event, he said something that was like really radical for me. Really radical just in general for a Pope to say. Oren por mí, which translates to pray for me. Like Pope Francis, literally the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church, the one who's supposed to be the intermediate between Jesus, God, and like everyone on earth, asks for everyone on earth to pray for him, which just shows vulnerability. It shows that it's like he needs us as well. And it's a lot of humility. That was really radical. And I can see now, growing up, it was really just these leaders who had political agendas behind them, who were like radical Trump supporters or radical right wing, who were using what I learned to be called like proof texting, grabbing different Bible verses to try to argue for their case for like why you should be Republican or why you should vote a certain way or hate certain people. So I was able to, talk with my family, and now they're able to challenge the beliefs that they grew up with. I've had conversations with my dad around why it's important to be inclusive for LGBT peoples in the Catholic Church. And at first, he was very reluctant, but he was open-minded. And now he always texts me like every time James Martin does something incredible. So I was just really happy I was one of those two people chosen. It was just really, it was a wonderful experience. I remember I was doing a Colores trip, quote unquote, offered by campus ministry. You go to Tijuana to learn more about like immigration justice. Met an immigrant woman from Mexico who had crossed the border, and getting to hear her story, it was that moment when I thought of my parents, because my parents are immigrants from Mexico, and hearing her experience and perspective and looking around the Zoom box with the other students that had come to the Colores trip, I realized that I was the only one whose background and family aligned with the story of this woman. And to them, it was beyond their imagination that someone would go through. And to me, it was like, I grew up hearing these stories from my parents. My dad comes from Mexico City, El DF, he calls it. And for him, he had to cross with the coyotes, which are like smugglers in Mexico. And when he got here, it got even harder because he was faced with racism, xenophobia. It was really hard for him to get a job. And he didn't get his papers till it was like 35. And for my mom, it was even worse experience because she had crossed the border multiple times. And I remember her explaining just some of her experiences where she would have to cross the desert. It was extremely hot. She had to go through a river. And I remember her explaining how like one time she had to be put in a vehicle inside of a little box, like a crate, and they put her in there with newspapers just for her to excrete any waste. And in my head, I just remember that moment being completely like emotionally distraught. Like, how can anyone treat a human this way? She was being treated like an animal. And to see these two people who I regard as my heroes, as people that I deeply love and respect, to hear about their experiences being treated like that, I was mad, angry. And I wanted to fight for people who had gone through those experiences like them. And it was in that moment where I remember shutting down the camera and like just crying. Yeah. And it's bringing up emotions right now, but I would say definitely that particular moment was when my eyes were open, because You can talk about the first gen experience being about how hard it is not having representation in academia, in the readings we're doing, the people you see in your classes or professors, but it wasn't that moment where I really lived it and I really saw it. The system wasn't built for someone like me to be able to come to the university like this. But again, getting involved with different communities, with a ton of activities on campus, and I got to meet a lot of great people with student governments and a whole plethora of different organizations. I've been able to make friends, create bonds, friendships, relationships, mentors, mentees, to just vibe with people, find a community. I love encountering God in the everyday and everything, and experiencing God through nature and through people, mostly from different backgrounds and ethnicities, and creating a bond like a family bond at LMU, away from home. Yeah, those experiences have been just so amazing. So yeah. So I guess that's how I've been so far.
Life takes you on a path you don't plan. I'm 20 when we meet. We know we are a good match. 1 year ago, I'm trying to convince my father to let me marry. 2 days ago, our wedding, our joy. My father with worry, my mother with tears. And now I'm on a plane, leaving Lebanon, headed to the United States. I haven't finished school, only 2 years undergrad. No experience. I've just become a wife, no experience. I'm traveling to a new country, no experience. I know we're a good match. Take a breath, squeeze his hand. I hear my mother's voice. The journey begins with one step. Northern California for the first 6 years. I always wanted to work, to contribute. My husband starts a company, computer distribution. Off and on, I try to work with my husband, but I have no skill, no experience. I learn by doing, start at the bottom, start by filing. The journey begins with one step. I want to finish school, start and stop. Children come, the first, the second, and then the third, and then the move to Los Angeles. I want to work, to contribute, to finish school. It's time. My youngest is 1 year, my eldest 5. Enroll at LMU. What am I thinking? I am overwhelmed with 3 kids and I enroll? Here I am. I'm here with 3 children. Who comes to class with 3 children? What was I thinking? Don't worry, she says. Welcome, she says. I will help you get where you want to get. Oh my God. Attitude. Rose, I have to stop and say something about attitude. Attitude, it's a small thing that makes a big difference. I cannot overemphasize. If she had had a different attitude, if the professor had said, well, it's going to be difficult. If they'd been cold or discouraging or said nothing, none of this journey would have been possible. It put my dad's mind at ease when I enrolled at LMU. It's why he was so opposed to my marriage. He was convinced I would never finish my education. He was adamant about education for all of us. I get my BA in English literature. Always, from my growing up in Beirut, I wanted to be a teacher. I imagined teaching English literature to youth. Well, my husband sells his business and shifts to another venture, real estate. Life takes you on a certain path you don't plan. Always, I wanted to work for my family. I want to contribute. So again, I'll learn by doing and by asking questions from people with more knowledge. You know, I go to meetings and discover I have a talent for choosing finishes. I learn accounting on the job. Now, by nature, I love organization, and accounting is a lot about being organized. I'm gaining experience, but I want more knowledge, more skill. I think I'll go back to school and get my real estate license. We form our own real estate development company. Oh, together we manage and develop properties. We don't sell. We buy the properties. Typically, we demolish, build, rent, and manage. I handle the accounting and billing during construction, during after projects are done. Oh, I love it. And 1,000-mile journey, right? Take another step. My major was English Lit. Business was not on my radar. Suddenly it's on my radar. I find myself in need of a stronger business foundation. I want a stronger foundation. So I applied to grad school, LMU Executive MBA program. Accepted. I'm going to grad school. The director believed in me before I believed in myself, believed I would excel. We will help you get to where you want to get. But I'm going to grad school with 3 teenagers who are driving us nuts. Yes, says my husband. And I've only worked solo, never in teams. So I run a business based on what I've learned on the job. Yes, we have 3 teenagers. They're nuts. So I can't. You can, but you have talent. But you're the smartest person I know. But get in the car. But I'll drive. Attitude. They believed I could excel. It was the best experience. You know, Rose, I have to say it's like 2 separate people, 2 separate lives. I was born in Beirut during the Civil War, from age 0 to 17. Going to school was a privilege. My father was a big believer in education. It was important to him that under all circumstances, we get an education. We went to the best schools in Lebanon, American schools, the International College, and then American University of Beirut. We went from home to school and back. Yeah, sometimes on the bus. Sometimes Dad drove us. War, bombings, hiding in basements. 1989 was a most difficult time. Yeah, on the way back from school, we see people burning in their cars. I remember studying for midterms, and there is some kind of battle, bombing. 12 times we were not able to go to school to do midterms. No school for 7 months. Then 1990, we did 2 years in one. Quite a difficult experience growing up. Lebanon is a very beautiful place in a bad neighborhood. Right now, it's a very sad place. In 2021, there was a devastating explosion, the 3rd largest explosion in world history. World history. I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days, Rose. When I see the footage of war in Ukraine, it brings back memories. I come from a middle-class family that lost everything, not once, not twice, several times. How did they survive that? how do you start again from zero? You know, when you're in it, well, people ask, how do you go through it? You don't know. You don't know that there is something different that exists. There was no social media. We didn't know something else existed. My mom would wake up, and if there was no power, sometimes there was only power for 1 or 2 hours a day to iron our clothes for school, she would use the bottom of the kettle. Yeah, you learn to be resilient. Yeah, my father was adamant about education. He would say, no one can ever take that from you. It becomes embedded in you. With education, with skills and knowledge, you can go anywhere in the world and start over again. He was relieved to see I did not stop my education. From my perspective, the experience of growing up in war, it served me to be resilient, to be persistent, to keep trying. It's also about purpose. I want to be an asset, a productive member of this family. My educational experience, Rose, it was exceptional. And not just for the mind, for the soul. I excelled, graduated top of my class, ready to be in charge of our company's finances. The best you can be is empathetic, non-judgmental, open-minded, compassionate. All of that made me a better parent. We come from different cultures, my children and I. I am an immigrant. I tried to raise them as I was raised in Lebanon. It's what I knew. And I feared they would lose touch with their roots. Yeah, we struggled with this cultural gap, especially my daughter and I. What is a prom? Why is it important to you? No, you can't stay out late. I don't understand these things. Well, my MBA gave me an arsenal of problem-solving skills and negotiation techniques. And I also started to think, am I limiting my children's potential? The best you can be is empathetic, non-judgmental, open-minded, compassionate. I began to see my children as teammates. There is no need to choose between cultures. We value our Lebanese roots. We prioritize family, and we are building a new culture that values growth and potential, that is unique and sustainable. Yeah. You know, teachers have enabled me to follow my passion. So I decided to go back into the classroom, but on the other side of the desk. I always had a passion for teaching. The subject is different than I originally intended to teach, English Lit, remember. I teach accounting and finance for non-business majors. Yeah. But I am still impacting lives in the same way I was blessed, by encouraging and letting students know they can believe in themselves because I believe in them and what they can accomplish. I am reminded every time I walk into the classroom, the impact I can have. Every word, every action can impact a student, and I want to make a positive difference. Attitude. I tell them, maybe someone has more knowledge of the material than me. That's okay. What I bring is the knowledge that if I did it, you can. Uncertainty, instability, I know it well. I grew up during a war, but we lived our lives fully. I was able to run a business based on what I learned on the job. Yeah, start at the bottom. Take small steps, ask questions, believe. We started the Amar Family Foundation to organize our philanthropic decisions. We focus on education, individuals and institutions. At the same time, there are other causes and people in need. And I know that women who have come through war and violence can change their families and communities positively. I continue to think this has been a growth journey from Beirut to Los Angeles, from having no education, no experience, to actually running a business and teaching others to run their own. You know, I find joy in being in the background, in being supportive, in contributing. I'm not good in the spotlight. So, Rose, if you can create something out of this conversation, believe me, I will not be offended.
In need of healing and compassion, we ask for the grace.
To stand firm on what I feel is right.
To stand firm for justice.
To support and have compassion.
To be a person who has a strong moral center.
To be resilient, to be persistent, to keep trying.
To play with the joy of playing.
To welcome people.
Start at the bottom. Take small steps. Ask questions. Believe.
Encountering God in the everyday and everything, experiencing God through nature and all things.
To help people to become who they were created to be.
To just like make friends, or just be able to vibe with people, to find community.
To make the world safe for persons to be human.
So that all may be one.
Paco Estrada.
Hania Amar.
Bradley Smith.
Lisa Jackson.
Amir Hussein.